In the last part of the series, part 28, we saw Peter confess that YAHSHUA was the Messiah, the Son of the living Elohim. We saw YAHSHUA explain that on that rock he will build his church. YAHSHUA gave many explanations on things. He explained that in order to follow him, we would have to deny ourselves. We must forsake this world and the things in it. He also said that we would have to bear our own crosses. He said we must take up our crosses and follow him. He said whoever is ashamed of him and his words, he will be ashamed of when he comes back in his glory with his holy angels. He said a lot of deep things that we all must consider in our walk with him. As you read his words, you will see that he speaks often about judgment and what will happen to those who do not heed his words. Apply the words to your life. Be a doer of the word and not just a hearer of it. The Bible is an instruction manual for our lives. Some people like to do things without reading the instruction manual. They like to wing it and improvise, often making crucial mistakes. Don't be one of these people. The Bible is important because when reading it, you allow the Holy Spirit to minister to you individually. You gain wisdom and guidance and understand how to please our Creator. We are moving fast towards the time of YAHSHUA's ultimate sacrifice and payment for us all. It is important that you make everything he says a part of you. Live through his words and follow him completely. Be of his assembly, the church. He's going to teach you what being in the church really means so that you can be a part of it. So let's listen. Let's begin. Now after 6 days, YAHSHUA took Peter, James, and John his brother, led them up on a high mountain by themselves, and he was transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became as white as the light. And behold, Moses and Elijah appeared to them, talking with him. Then Peter answered and said to YAHSHUA, Adonai, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, let us make here 3 tabernacles, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. While he was still speaking, behold, a bright cloud overshadowed them, and suddenly a voice came out of the cloud saying, This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Hear him. And when the disciples heard it, they fell on their faces and were greatly afraid. But YAHSHUA came and touched them and said, Arise, and do not be afraid. And when they had lifted up their eyes, they saw no one but YAHSHUA only. Now as they came down from the mountain, YAHSHUA commanded them, saying, Tell the vision to no one until the Son of Man is risen from the dead. And his disciples asked him, saying, Why then do the scribes say that Elijah must come first? YAHSHUA answered and said to them, Indeed, Elijah is coming first, and will restore all things. But I say to you that Elijah has come already, and they did not know him, but did to him whatever they wished. Likewise, the Son of Man is also about to suffer at their hands. Then the disciples understood that he spoke to them of John the Baptist. This was very powerful. When we see both Moses and Elijah, this is a confirmation of the Old Testament. Moses and Elijah representing the Old Testament being the personification of the law and the prophets. When Yahweh said, This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased, if you remember, these words were given the same way when YAHSHUA was baptized by John the Baptist. This is showing that YAHSHUA is a fulfillment of what the law and the prophets always alluded to. Moses and Elijah's presence being alongside YAHSHUA showed YAHSHUA being fulfillment to what the law and prophets spoke on. When Yahweh said, Hear him, it goes back to Old Testament guidance found in Deuteronomy chapter 18, verse 15. It says, Yahweh your Elohim will raise up for you a prophet like me from your midst, from your brethren. Him you shall hear. YAHSHUA was all of this. They were not to tell anyone of the vision until after he resurrected, because the masses were not ready to know. They still had the wrong understanding of what the Messiah's purpose was. They always expected a conquering king like King David, not a suffering servant like YAHSHUA. The disciples were a little confused. They asked, Why then do the scribes say that Elijah must come first? They were seeing Elijah in front of them, and if the scribes were right, why shouldn't they tell everyone that Elijah did actually appear? It would be a confirmation of prophecy. YAHSHUA explained that the people already saw Elijah, and they did whatever they wished to him. John the Baptist was Elijah. He wasn't a reincarnation of Elijah, but one who ministered in the spirit and power of Elijah in preparing the way for the Messiah. When applying this today, all of this shows us that we continually expect prophecy to be carried out the way we expect in our own reasoning. But Elohim has his own way of doing things, and though it is being fulfilled, you might not recognize it because you're inflexible in your understanding and you miss him. That's why it's important just to understand YAHSHUA, period. Because if you understand him and you're connected to him, you won't miss the things he's doing. So after that, when he came to the disciples, he saw a great multitude around them, and scribes disputing with them. Immediately, when they saw him, all the people were greatly amazed, and running to him, greeted him. And he asked the scribes, "What are you discussing with them?" Then one of the crowd answered and said, "Teacher, I brought you my son, who has a mute spirit. And wherever it seizes him, it throws him down. He foams at the mouth, gnashes his teeth, and becomes rigid. So I spoke to your disciples that they should cast it out, but they could not." He answered him and said, "O faithless generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I bear with you? Bring him to me." Then they brought him to him, and when he saw him, immediately the spirit convulsed him, and he fell on the ground and wallowed, foaming at the mouth. So he asked his father, "How long has this been happening to him?" And he said, "From childhood, and often he has thrown him both into fire and into water to destroy him. But if you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us." YAHSHUA said to him, "If you can believe, all things are possible to him who believes." Immediately, the father of the child cried out and said with tears, "Adonai, I believe. Help my unbelief." When YAHSHUA saw that the people came running together, he rebuked the unclean spirit, saying to it, "Deaf and dumb spirit, I command you, come out of him and enter him no more." Then the spirit cried out, convulsed him greatly, and came out of him. And he became as one dead, so that many said, "He is dead." But YAHSHUA took him by the hand and lifted him up, and he arose. And when he had come into the house, his disciples asked him privately, "Why could we not cast it out?" So he said to them, "This kind can come out by nothing but prayer and fasting." He also said to them, "Because of your unbelief. For assuredly I say to you, if you have faith as a mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, 'Move from here to there,' and it will move, and nothing will be impossible for you." Then they departed from there and passed through Galilee, and he did not want anyone else to know. So we have a demon-possessed child here. He had been that way since his childhood. While YAHSHUA was on the mountain, the disciples had been asked to help. They tried to assist, but were not able to remove the demon. The man had then asked YAHSHUA for help, and he obviously believed that YAHSHUA could help him. That's why he asked. YAHSHUA was disappointed the disciples didn't have enough faith and power yet to handle it. When he told the man he would help, he explained that all things are possible to those who believe. The man said he did believe, but he needed help with his unbelief. That sounds like most of us. We believe in YAHSHUA, we have faith in him, that's why we call on him, but we are often plagued by our disbelief. There can be doubt that nags at us and blocks our faith. I know you have faith in him, but I want you to focus on your disbelief. This disbelief will cause him not to manifest fully in your life. Reduce your disbelief. And as far as that demon, YAHSHUA said that fasting and prayer were required to win battles against certain difficult demons. So you should note that when you have a challenging issue in your life that is not breaking, you might want to engage in fasting and prayer. He also told them that they failed in faith. They had the power, but they failed to use it correctly. Use this understanding for yourself, because if you struggle with certain situations, you need more faith. Build your faith and reduce your disbelief. This is the equation of your life. So later, when they had come to Capernaum, those who had received the temple tax came to Peter and said, "Does your teacher not pay the temple tax?" He said, "Yes." And when he had come into the house, YAHSHUA anticipated him, saying, "What do you think, Simon? From whom do the kings of the earth take customs or taxes? From their sons or from strangers?" Peter said to him, "From strangers." YAHSHUA said to him, "Then the sons are free. Nevertheless, lest we offend them, go to the sea, cast in a hook, and take the fish that comes up first. And when you have opened its mouth, you will find a piece of money. Take that and give it to them for me and you." The temple tax was a tax given annually by every adult Jewish male over 20 years of age for maintaining the temple. YAHSHUA was explaining that as the son of Elohim, he was free from the obligation to pay the tax. The temple belonged to him. But to keep from offending people, he provided the money to pay the tax in a way only he could. So later at that time, the disciples came to YAHSHUA, saying, "Who then is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" Then YAHSHUA called a little child to him, set him in the midst of him, and said, "Assuredly, I say to you, unless you are converted and become as little children, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever humbles himself as this little child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Whoever receives one little child like this in my name receives me." When a child is being taught for the first time, they do not come in as a know-it-all or trying to be a teacher. They listen humbly and receive what is being taught. This is about humility. Are you teachable, or do you always have to be the teacher? Many people are so often seeking a rank or position in the kingdom, and that often breeds a lack of humility. Remember, you never know everything, and the best way to learn is to learn in humility. Humble yourself, and you will see the best gains in your growth. Someone can always provide different understandings and views you have never considered. Learn as a child would. Everyone can be taught more. When you understand this, you remain humble and are able to continuously learn. Many of the Jews missed their Messiah because they weren't humble. They lacked humility. They felt they knew what Yahweh was going to do, and they were wrong. Humble yourselves as little children. He continued speaking, saying, "But whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it would be better for him if a millstone were hung around his neck, and he were drowned in the depth of the sea. Woe to the world because of offenses, for offenses must come, but woe to that man by whom the offenses come. If your hand or foot causes you to sin, cut it off and cast it from you. It is better for you to enter into life lame or maimed, rather than having 2 hands or 2 feet, to be cast into everlasting fire. And if your eyes cause you to sin, pluck it out and cast it from you. It is better for you to enter into life with 1 eye, rather than having 2 eyes, to be cast into hellfire. Take heed that you do not despise one of these little ones. For I say to you that in heaven their angels always see the face of my Father who is in heaven. For the Son of Man has come to save that which was lost." This is important to keep in mind. YAHSHUA said, "But whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it would be better for him if a millstone were hung around his neck, and if he were drowned in the depths of the sea. Woe to the world because of offenses, for offenses must come, but woe to that man by whom the offense comes." He said that those who cause believers to sin, it would be better for them to have just died a horrible death. He said, "Woe to that man by whom the offenses come." I instantly think about the many false pastors in churches that take believers and cause them to sin. Those that use a church as a business and in process promote sin. I also think about the sellouts who have sold their souls for fame and fortune. Those who are given assignments to make believers sin. Bottom line with this, do not promote sin. Now John answered him, saying, "Teacher, we saw someone who does not follow us casting out demons in your name, and we forbade him because he does not follow us." But YAHSHUA said, "Do not forbid him, for no one who works a miracle in my name can soon afterwards speak evil of me. For he who is not against us is on our side. For whoever gives you a cup of water to drink in my name, because you belong to the Messiah, assuredly I say to you, he will by no means lose his reward." There were those that heard YAHSHUA teach and believed in him, and though they were not a disciple, they had enough belief to cast out demons in the name of YAHSHUA. In this piece of scripture, YAHSHUA was not given a blind endorsement to all who claimed to follow him. He was simply reminding the disciples that the work of Elohim was not necessarily restricted to their small group. YAHSHUA continued speaking, saying, "What do you think? If a man has 100 sheep, and one of them goes astray, does he not leave the 99 and go to the mountains to seek the one that is straying? And if he should find it, assuredly I say to you, he rejoices more over that one sheep than over the 99 that did not go astray. Even so, it is not the will of your Father who is in heaven that one of these little ones should perish. Moreover, if your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he hears you, you have gained your brother. But if he will not hear, take with you 1 or 2 more, that by the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses every word may be established. And if he refuses to hear them, tell it to the church. But if he refuses even to hear the church, let him be to you like a heathen and a tax collector. Assuredly, I say to you, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Again, I say to you that if 2 of you agree on earth concerning anything that they ask, it will be done for them by my Father in heaven. For where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, I am there in the midst of them. YAHSHUA first explained that it is not the will of the Father that he loses any of his sheep, and that he rejoices when that sheep that goes astray is then found. So though we may sin and stray away, it is not the will of the Father that we stay lost. He always wants you to come back to him. YAHSHUA gave instruction on how to handle a brother or sister that sinned against you, and he then said, where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, I am there in the midst of them. This is the church. When multiple believers are gathered to worship him and speak on him, he is there in the midst of them. So don't feel that because your group is small, YAHSHUA is not blessing your group. Don't think because you don't have a huge church with 1,000 members that YAHSHUA isn't in the midst of you. When 2 or 3 are gathered together in his name, he is there. Don't ever forget that. So Peter then came to him and said, Adonai, how often shall my brother sin against me, and I forgive him? Up to 7 times? YAHSHUA said to him, I do not say to you, up to 7 times, but up to 70 times 7. Therefore the kingdom of heaven is like a certain king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. And when he had begun to settle accounts, one was brought to him who owed him 10,000 talents. Okay, let's stop real quick here. First off, Peter asked YAHSHUA about forgiveness, and how many times are we to forgive one for their offenses. Peter asked if up to 7 times would be enough, and YAHSHUA said 70 times 7, meaning don't keep count, just keep forgiving. And I'm happy to know that that's how he felt, because if he stopped forgiving me after my 7th offense, I would never be in his will today. He's not keeping count of how many times he's forgiving you, so you should not keep count on how much you need to forgive others. Show others grace so that you can always help bring them back to the will of the Father. Now he explains it more as we go through this parable. Now when he spoke about the 10,000 talents, I want you to understand. A denarii was worth 1 day of wages. A talent was worth 6,000 denarii. 10,000 talents would be worth about 60 million days of wages. This man owed an impossible amount to be repaid. So let's start it again. YAHSHUA said, Therefore, the kingdom of heaven is like a certain king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. And when he had begun to settle accounts, one was brought to him who owed him 10,000 talents. But as he was not able to pay, his master commanded that he be sold, with his wife and children and all that he had, and that payment be made. The servant therefore fell down before him, saying, Master, have patience with me, and I will pay you all. Then the master of that servant was moved with compassion, released him, and forgave him the debt. But that servant went out and found one of his fellow servants, who owed him 100 denarii. And he laid hands on him, and took him by the throat, saying, Pay me what you owe. So his fellow servant fell down at his feet, and begged him, saying, Have patience with me, and I will pay you all. And he would not, but went and threw him into prison till he should pay the debt. So when his fellow servants saw what had been done, they were very grieved, and came and told their master all that had been done. Then his master, after he had called him, said to him, You wicked servant, I forgave you all that debt, because you begged me. Should you not have also had compassion on your fellow servant, just as I had pity on you? And his master was angry, and delivered him to the torturers until he should pay all that was due to him. So my heavenly Father also will do to you, if each of you from his heart does not forgive his brother his trespasses. YAHSHUA is teaching very much about forgiveness, and you should heed this in your heart. He showed that the man who owed the king 60 million days of wages to be repaid was basically us. He is showing we have a huge debt with the Father to be forgiven for. But he has compassion on us and forgives our debts. But then someone else wrongs us in a much smaller way, and we won't apply the same grace that he applies to us. We decide to hold them to the fire and have no forgiveness. When we do this, he will call us a wicked servant, and that debt that was initially forgiven is now required to be repaid, but he delivers us to torturers until it is repaid. This is how he deals with us that won't act with forgiveness. He spoke about this in his Sermon on the Mount. He just explained it with greater detail. Forgiveness is a very hard thing to do, but we must forgive just as our Father forgives us. If someone seeks forgiveness, forgive them. Show them grace so that you are not in danger of not being forgiven. Don't be one that follows YAHSHUA and his words, but still falls short on this. You must have forgiveness. Don't fall short in this, because this measure in which you will not forgive someone, he will in turn not forgive you. Remember this. Okay, so let's review what we should learn from this part in the series. 1. Moses and Elijah both appearing on the mountain was a confirmation of the Old Testament. They were the personifications of the law and the prophets steering us to YAHSHUA. 2. The disciples wanted to spread the word that Elijah had come and fulfill the prophecy of the scribes. 3. YAHSHUA explained that Elijah already did come, and the people did whatever they wished with him. The Elijah that came was John the Baptist. 4. YAHSHUA says all things are possible to those who believe. 5. In your walk, you must increase your faith and reduce your disbelief. Your disbelief will not allow YAHSHUA to fully work in your life. 6. There are certain demons that only are casted out through fasting and prayer. Remember this when coming against a strong spiritual problem. 7. Whoever humbles themselves as a little child is greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Humble yourself, be teachable, and do not claim to have stronger understanding than everyone else. Everyone can be taught more. When you understand this, you remain humble and are able to continuously learn. 8. YAHSHUA said, "But whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it would be better for him if a millstone were hung around his neck and he were drowned in the depth of the sea." Woe to the world because of offenses. For offenses must come, but woe to that man by whom the offense comes. Don't promote sin. 9. It is not the will of the Father that he loses any of his sheep. 10. Where 2 or 3 are gathered together in his name, YAHSHUA is there in the midst of them. 11. Place no limits on how much you must forgive others. 12. Forgiveness is a very hard thing to do, but we must forgive just as our Father forgives us. If someone seeks forgiveness, forgive them. Show them grace so that you are not in danger of not being forgiven yourself. One thing that many of us struggle with in our walk is forgiveness. As we continue to forsake this world and follow YAHSHUA, people will do us wrong. It is inevitable that we will have to learn the art of forgiveness. It is one of the hardest things to do because people often come against us. But this also is an attempt from Satan that many of us fall short in. He uses people to come against us so badly that we harbor resentment towards them. We do not allow forgiveness in our hearts. We often hold their wrongdoings against them. Today, you must recognize this tactic of Satan and break free from it. Reduce the burden of unforgiveness on your heart and keep yourself right with Elohim. He will not forgive you if you cannot forgive others. Our forgiveness of others can often be a testimony for building their faith. Our unforgiveness can also be a testimony of why they do not have faith. Basically, why should they believe in our faith when we won't forgive? You do not need to be a punching bag, but if someone keeps coming back, keep them close to you. Your unforgiveness will just drive them away and leave no one there to minister to them. I know this is a very difficult piece to our walk as believers, but this is something you want to gain strength and understanding in. The parable that YAHSHUA showed about forgiveness is very easy to understand. Forgive others as the Father forgives you. Roll this part in your walk with Him. It will set you free from anger, resentment, and also set you free from your debt that must be forgiven as well. Don't place a number on how many times someone has wronged you. If they still want to be forgiven, forgive them. Pray for them, and then give it to the Father. The only thing you can control is yourself, so do that. Have forgiveness in your heart, and do not hold your forgiveness back from anyone. Okay, thanks again for watching. If this has blessed you, please make sure to like it and share it. If you haven't done so already, please make sure you've subscribed to this channel. I upload every Friday. Don't forget to follow this ministry on Facebook and Instagram. As always, I would like to give a special thank you to those who have donated to this ministry. Your contribution is a huge blessing to me, and it helps me continue on with this assignment. Your support is a blessing, and I wouldn't be able to continue without you. Thank you for your obedience to Yahweh's call on your heart. I'm humbled by your support, and I'm very thankful for you. Thanks again, everyone, for watching. I love you all.